to give a bit of a follow-up on setting OS X free. And I've gotten quite a few PMs, and so I'm going to try to answer those and get all this information in as quickly as possible. First off, I want to address the OS issue, and predominantly in why market share was just dwindling away from Apple, especially after the release of, let's just say, Windows 2.0. Because I would say Windows 1 really wasn't all that popular. And I think at that time, System 6 was still around, and then, what was it, in the early 90s, you had System 7, which was actually actually slower and less stable than System 6. And as Windows progressed from 2.0 to 3, Windows presented some major advantages in applications and different design used from its operating system in comparison to Apple's System 7, which Apple System 7, you have a long history that it actually covered. Anyway, to give the story of Apple's quest for an operating system to compete with Windows Onslaught, they had various projects like Pink and Red, Star Trek, New Kernel, Copland, Gershwin, Taligent, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to just give a brief overview of those attempted projects, because none of them really were realized in the end. Alright, so I'll start with Project Star Trek. Project Star Trek was a sort of panic, well, okay, I won't use the word panic, but a fear that Novell had in conjunction with Apple of the Windows release of 3.11 in '92 and the upcoming rumors of Project Chicago, which culminated in Windows 95 and Windows NT. So this was basically an attempt to get Apple to actually run on x86. I think the first attempt was actually done in 1985, right after Steve Jobs left, but was canceled. But this was an effort in the Star Trek project to bring Apple onto Intel chipset. To make it short, didn't happen to be. Project Raptor basically was sort of a revival of Star Trek, but this was going to be a microkernel similar to Mach, and it was going to run on multiple platforms or different types of architecture, including Intel. It also was canceled. Alright, then came Project Taligent, which was a joint venture with IBM, and I think this stemmed from the Pink project, which was supposed to be an object-oriented operating system. Now, this Taligent was based off of Mach, okay, the Mach kernel, and it eventually was absorbed by IBM and became what was known as Common Point. And just a long story short, Apple was pretty much abandoned, and like I said, IBM took over the whole project and the way it went. But it was originally designed to compete even with NeXT, which was Steve Jobs' system, and of course the current Windows systems, which were NT. Then we come to Copland, which was like a big deal for Apple. It was going to have all kinds of new features, and quite possibly the list was so long and the goals were so elusive, and the project just kept slipping, and basically it got canceled in 1996. This then led to Apple almost coming very close to acquiring BOS, I should say. And that basically fell through because of BOS wanted more money, Apple wanted to pay less money. Let's just make that short. And this culminates to Apple, like I even said, considered Windows, but thank the Lord, acquired NeXT and used NeXT software as operating system, which we all know in history. So that's kind of a quick glance at the history of going through all the OSs. that Apple was trying to answer the onslaught. And during this entire time, Apple's market share was just tanking. So. I wanted to talk a little bit about the clones. Alright, so let's talk about Scully. Now, to correct past videos where I used Scully's name inappropriately in a timeline, Scully was really at first very anti-clone, and that came from those that stole the Apple II ROM. But Apple did answer back in an attempt to recapture some of the lost revenue in legally licensing the Apple II ROM. So you could say that of sorts is the first legal licensing or cloning, if you will. Let's talk about Scully. Like I said, so Scully was cautious of clones, but he actually did attempt to give it a shot. But it was canceled by himself and upper management, or from pressure from upper management, and most of all because Apple was already losing a lot of market share, and clones wouldn't have helped rebuild that market share. So that completely really freaked out Scully. Another point was that Apple would have merged with Sun Microsystems, and Sun was basically already king with the Spark chip. It already was working on Java. It was pretty much king of the server markets, and Apple was a great way of bringing it into the retail market. And so it came very, very, very close. But John Scully was ousted in 1993, and primarily because Apple was just losing so much market share. Keep in mind, this is a year after, well, it's almost a year after the release of Windows 3.11, which was just a monumental success for Windows. So Scully is ousted in 1993, and that went to Spindler. Basically, it went to Spindler as a new CEO, and at that time, like I said, the market share things were not. It was just not good for Apple. So Spindler's answer was to get Mac out there as best as he can, and the way to do that was to clone. Now, the original plan was to get Compaq and Gateway on board because they're credible computer. They're credible computer OEMs at that time, and it would have been fantastic for Apple to actually get them to clone Apple computers, but they refused, and that meant that Spindler was forced to go with smaller shops, less credible shops, to clone the Apple computer, and thus the Apple clones really didn't work out. I mean, what do you do as a CEO when you took over for Scully? Things were already looking bad. Apple's declining. You really have no other options. I mean, you're trying to build these OS projects in the meantime to answer Windows and everybody else, but it's just very difficult to juggle all this stuff. And when Compaq and Gateway tells you, no, we're not interested in cloning your products, you're really just, okay, I'll take what I can get. And of course, those smaller cloners really couldn't do anything for pervading the Apple computer any further.